The vast space station floated high above the edge of the galaxy, surrounded by shimmering stars and the glowing pulse of a nearby star. It was a place of dreams and great achievements. It was here, on this station, that the greatest engineers of the galaxy gathered to work on projects that would shape the future of the universe. The engineers at Zedran Industries had always been the best, always on top. Their work was flawless. Their designs were the future. Among these engineers were two names that stood out, even in a place filled with the best of the best. Juhayan and Song-ho had both joined Zedran Industries as young professionals, fresh out of engineering academies. They had been recruited because of their talents, their creativity, and their ability to think outside the box. Now, years later, they had become legends in their own right. Juhayan was known for her calm and methodical nature. She had a mind that could break down even the most complicated systems into something simple and manageable. It was her ability to find solutions quickly and efficiently that had earned her the respect of her colleagues. Sung-ho, on the other hand, was the dreamer. He had the ability to think beyond what was possible, always searching for new ways to solve old problems. His designs were bold, daring, and often ahead of their time. Together, they made a powerful team, one that could solve any problem and build anything. They worked in the heart of the space station. Inside a massive engineering hall, the room was filled with screens, holograms, and all kinds of tools. Engineers sat at desks, talking in hushed tones as they worked on their designs. Juhyun and Sung-ho had their own private workstations, but they often spent time together, bouncing ideas off each other. The space station was constantly buzzing with activity. People came and went, each one focused on their task, working toward the same goal: progress. Zedran Industries had always been known for its grand projects. The company was tasked with building ships that could travel faster than light, artificial intelligences that could think and learn like humans, and even entire cities on distant planets. The engineers were always pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Juhyun and Sung-ho were no exception. Today, however, something felt different. There was an air of excitement in the station that Juhyun couldn't ignore. She glanced at Sunjo, who was staring at his computer screen with intense focus. She could see the spark in his eyes, the same spark that had been there when they first started working together. Something had caught his attention. "Sunshu," she said softly, walking over to his desk. "What are you looking at?" Sung-ho didn't look up at first, but after a moment, he turned his head toward her. A smile spread across his face. "You're not going to believe this?" he said, his voice filled with excitement. "What is it?" Juhyun asked, leaning over to look at his screen. Sung-ho showed her the data. It was a report from a recent mission to explore a distant region of space, a region known for its strange anomalies. The report was from a group of engineers who had been working on a new type of propulsion system. The project was a failure, but the engineers had made an unexpected discovery. "Look at this," Sung-ho said, pointing to a section of the report. "They found a human ship." Juhyun blinked, surprised. "A human ship? But humans. They don't have the technology we do. How could they have built something that could make it all the way out here?" Sung-ho shook his head. "That's the thing. The ship wasn't anything special. It wasn't like the ships we build. It was primitive, old-fashioned. But somehow, it made it to the edge of the galaxy. It shouldn't have been able to do that." Juhyun frowned, puzzled. "Are you telling me that humans built a ship that could travel across the galaxy with old technology?" Sung-ho nodded. "That's exactly what I'm saying." For a moment, there was silence between them. Juhyun stared at the data, trying to process what Sung-ho had just said. It didn't make sense. The humans didn't have the advanced energy systems or the warp drives that the engineers on this station used. They didn't have the AI to guide their ships or the power sources to keep them running for extended periods. So how could they have built something that could survive in the vastness of space for so long? "There's more," Sung-ho continued, his voice lowering. "The ship's design is strange. It's not like anything we've ever seen before. It is simple in a way, basic even. But it works." Juhyun raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, it works?" Sung-ho tapped the screen again, bringing up a detailed diagram of the ship's design. It was rough and unrefined, but it had a certain charm to it. The structure was sturdy, with reinforced hull plating and a simple propulsion system. There were no fancy energy shields or advanced navigation systems. Just basic engines, basic life support systems, simple communication tools. But despite its simplicity, the ship had survived. It had made it across the galaxy and arrived at the edge of their station, undetected by any of their advanced scanning systems. "This doesn't make sense," Juhyan muttered, her mind racing. "How could a ship like this even survive, let alone make it this far?" Sung-ho leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen with a look of awe on his face. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. We have all this advanced technology, all these systems designed to keep us safe and make our lives easier. But this ship, with its old basic design, has something we don't." Juhyan's eyes narrowed. "You think it has?" "Ingenuity." Sung-ho turned to her with a slow smile. "Exactly." For a moment, the two engineers sat in silence, each lost in thought. They had spent their entire careers designing ships and systems that were meant to be the pinnacle of technology, the very best the galaxy had to offer. And yet here was a ship built by a race with far fewer resources, far less advanced technology, and yet it had survived. It wasn't just a machine. It was a symbol of human resilience, a symbol of ingenuity, creativity, and the ability to adapt. Juhyan looked up at Sung-ho, her expression thoughtful. "We need to find this ship. We need to know how it works." Sung-ho nodded eagerly. "I agree. I think this could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for." Without another word, the two engineers began preparing to leave their station and track down the human ship. They didn't know what they would find, but they knew one thing for sure. This simple, unrefined ship was something that would change the way they looked at technology forever. Juhyan and Sung-ho didn't waste any time. They immediately started preparing for their trip to find the human ship. The excitement was buzzing in the air. Even the engineers at Zedran Industries could sense something unusual was happening. There was a shift in the energy of the station. The idea that a human ship, something so basic and different, could defy the odds and reach. The edge of the galaxy had captured everyone's attention. It was an exciting mystery. Juhyan and Sung-ho were determined to solve it. The space station was filled with advanced technology. There were ships that could travel at incredible speeds, scanning systems that could detect even the smallest particles in the vastness of space, and artificial intelligence systems that could calculate the most efficient ways to travel between stars. But none of that could explain how a simple human ship had made it so far. With no advanced technology to guide it, Juhyan and Sung-ho made their way to the docking bay, where the shuttle was waiting to take them out into space. As they boarded the small ship, Sung-ho turned to Juhyan, his eyes still bright with excitement. "Can you believe it?" Sung-ho asked. "A human ship. Out here, at the edge of the galaxy? I never thought we would see something like this." Juhyan smiled, though her mind was focused on the task at hand. "I'm still trying to wrap my head around it," she said. "But if there's one thing I know, it's that we need to see this ship for ourselves. We need to understand how it works." The shuttle's engines hummed to life, and the two engineers leaned back in their seats as the ship shot out of the docking bay and into the cold void of space. As the shuttle passed through the station's atmosphere, Juhyan looked out the window. The vastness of space stretched out before her, endless and quiet. It was both beautiful and intimidating at the same time. "Do you think we're going to find any answers out there?" Sung-ho asked, his voice filled with curiosity. "We have to," Juhyan replied, her voice steady. "This ship is too strange to ignore. It's something new, something that doesn't fit the rules we've always followed." As they traveled deeper into space, Juhyan and Sun-jo reviewed the data again. The human ship had been found drifting near a small moon, about 3 days' journey from their station. The ship's engines were running, though, at a low power. It was sending out a weak signal as they approached the location. Juhyan couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and confusion. What would they find? Would it be as simple as they had thought, or was there more to this ship than met the eye? The shuttle slowly came to a stop near the human ship. It was a strange sight. The ship was old, its hull scratched and dented from years of travel. It wasn't like the sleek, shiny designs Ju-hyun and Sung-ho were used to seeing. There were no advanced shields or invisible energy fields surrounding the ship. Instead, it looked like something that had been built with hard work and care, rather than cutting-edge technology. It was rough, almost primitive, but it had survived. The two engineers stared at the ship through the shuttle's window. It was small, no bigger than a few hundred meters in length, with a round, bulky design. There were no flashy lights or advanced features, just simple windows and basic thrusters. Ju-hyun noticed that the ship's engine compartment was clearly exposed, with rust spots and signs of wear. It wasn't the kind of ship that would normally be able to survive the harsh conditions of space for such a long time. "Is this really the ship?" Sung-ho asked, almost in disbelief. Ju-hyun nodded. "It's the one. The readings match." They slowly approached the ship and docked the shuttle. Once they were safely inside the docking bay, the two engineers stepped out and made their way to the entrance. The human ship looked even older up close. The metal was scratched and faded, but the doors were still intact, and the basic life support systems were still working. Ju-hyun felt a sense of respect for the ship. It wasn't pretty, but it had kept going. "Let's go inside," Ju-hyun said, her voice steady. Though she was eager to discover more, they entered the ship, moving cautiously through the narrow hallway. The inside of the ship was just as rough as the outside. There were wires hanging from the ceiling, old consoles with buttons that looked like they hadn't been used in years, and a strange smell of old metal and something else, something more organic. As they walked deeper into the ship, they finally encountered the human crew. They were sitting at a small table, drinking something that smelled faintly of coffee. They didn't seem surprised to see Ju-hyun and Sung-ho. In fact, they looked rather calm, as if they had been expecting visitors all along. The first to stand up was a tall man with short, messy black hair and a rugged look to him. He wore a simple uniform, and his face was marked with the signs of someone who had spent a long time in space. His eyes were sharp, and there was a sense of confidence in his posture. "Welcome aboard," the man said, his voice deep and calm. "I'm Captain Hajun. This is Myung, our engineer, and Ji-woo, our pilot." Ju-hyun and Sung-ho exchanged looks before stepping forward to introduce themselves. "I'm Ju-hyun," she said, offering her hand. "And this is Sung-ho. We're engineers from Zedran Industries. We've come to learn more about your ship." Captain Hajun shook her hand firmly. "It's good to meet you both. We're happy to show you around." Ju-hyun and Sung-ho followed the crew deeper into the ship, their minds racing with questions. How had humans built a ship like this? What kind of technology were they using? And, more importantly, how had it survived so long in the depths of space? As they walked through the ship, Myung, the engineer, explained how the ship had been built. She spoke with pride about the way they had used old, recycled parts, relying on simple tools and methods to put the ship together. It wasn't as advanced as the ships from Zedran Industries, but it worked. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Ju-hyun was fascinated. She had expected the humans to be more reliant on technology, but instead, they had made do with what they had. They had learned to improvise, to adapt, and to keep moving forward. It was something Ju-hyun and Sung-jo had never fully appreciated before. "We don't have the kind of resources you do," Myung said, smiling at them. "But we make do, and that's what keeps us going." As the tour continued, Ju-hyun and Sung-ho couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The humans were resilient. They had survived in a way that was different from the way the engineers on Zedran Industries had been taught to think. It wasn't about relying on the latest and greatest technology. It was about using what you had, making it work. As they finished the tour and returned to the small common area, Captain Hajun looked at Ju-hyun and Sung-ho with a knowing smile. "You know," he said, "sometimes the simplest solutions are the best." The crew of the human ship had invited Ju-hyun and Sung-ho to stay for a while, offering them food and a chance to talk about their journey. As the hours passed, the two engineers found themselves increasingly fascinated by the humans' way of life. Everything about the ship was different from what they were used to. It was far from the high-tech, sleek designs of the Zedran Industries ships they had worked on for years. Yet it worked. Ju-hyun and Sung-ho sat at a small table in the ship's common room. Simple space with worn chairs and a small window showing the black void of space. Myung, the ship's engineer, was sitting across from them, talking about the repairs they had made to the ship over the years. "This ship wasn't built to last," Myung said, her eyes reflecting a mix of pride and exhaustion. "But we've kept it going. Every time something breaks, we fix it ourselves. There's no AI to do it for us. We have to use our hands and our minds." Sung-ho was silent for a moment, his mind racing with thoughts. "But that's the thing," he said, his voice filled with curiosity. "You don't have the advanced technology that we do. Your ship's systems are basic, even outdated. And yet, it works. You've kept it running for years. How?" Myung smiled softly, leaning back in her chair. "I think it's because we've had to learn how to think for ourselves. When you rely on AI or complex systems, you forget how to adapt. You get used to everything being controlled for you. But when you're on your own, you learn to improvise, to solve problems quickly, and you learn to appreciate the things you have." Ju-hyun looked at her thoughtfully. "It's like you've learned to use your limitations to your advantage." Myung nodded. "Exactly. We don't have the fancy tools or the advanced technology that you do, but we make do with what we have. And that's what keeps us alive." The more Ju-hyun and Sung-ho listened, the more they began to realize something important. The humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. They were adapting in ways the engineers at Zedran Industries had never considered. Ju-hyun had always believed that technology and progress were the key to solving problems. But now, she saw that sometimes the answers didn't lie in the latest advancements or the most complicated systems. Sometimes the answers lay in simplicity. In finding solutions with the resources at hand, they had spent so many years building machines that could think for themselves, designing systems that could predict every possible outcome. But now, as they listened to the human crew talk about their experiences, Hoi-an began to question everything they had ever built. Was all their advanced technology really the answer? Or had they lost something along the way? Had they forgotten the true essence of innovation? Sung-ho seemed to be having the same thoughts. "You know," he said slowly, "we've been working so hard to build better ships, more advanced systems, and smarter AI. But we've forgotten something important. We've forgotten how to think like you. How to fix things with our own hands, with our own minds." Ju-hyun nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "We've relied too much on our technology, on machines that think for us. But what happens when the machines fail? What happens when the system breaks down? Can we still think for ourselves?" Myung's smile widened. "I think you've already figured it out." It was a turning point for both Ju-hyun and Sung-ho. They had come to this ship looking for answers, hoping to find something to explain the mystery of the human technology. But what they had discovered was something far more valuable. It wasn't just the technology that mattered, it was the mindset behind it. It was the ability to think for oneself, to adapt to any situation, and to find solutions with whatever tools were available. That was the true key to survival. That was what made the humans different. Ju-hyun sat back in her chair, staring out the small window. The stars outside seemed distant and unreachable, but her mind was filled with new ideas. "Maybe we've been too focused on the wrong things," she said softly. "We've been so obsessed with making perfect systems, perfect machines, but in the end, it's the humans who have the edge. They don't rely on perfection. They rely on their ability to adapt, to think on their feet." Sung-ho was quiet for a moment before he spoke. "We've been so focused on control, on building machines that do everything for us, but maybe we've lost something in the process. Maybe we've forgotten how to be resourceful, how to solve problems on our own." Ju-hyun turned to him, her expression serious. "I think you're right. We've created systems that are too complex, too dependent on advanced technology. We've forgotten the value of simplicity." Myung, who had been listening to their conversation with interest, nodded in agreement. "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. The more complex we make things, the more room there is for failure. But with simplicity, there's less chance of things going wrong." Ju-hyun and Sung-ho exchanged a look. It was as if the walls they had built around their understanding of technology were slowly crumbling. Everything they had thought they knew about engineering, about what made a successful design, was being challenged. The humans had shown them a different way, A way that didn't rely on perfection or advanced systems, but on something far more important: the ability to adapt. Seung-Ho stood up suddenly, his eyes alight with excitement. Ju-hyun, we have to take what we've learned here and apply it. We need to rethink everything. We need to stop relying on AI to do our thinking for us. We need to go back to basics and build something that's simple but effective. Something that works because it's designed by people who know how to solve problems. Ju-hyun stood as well, her mind racing with ideas. You're right. We've spent so long building systems that are too perfect. It's time to get back to what really matters. Real innovation comes from within, not from machines. As they walked toward the airlock to leave the human ship, Ju-hyun felt a sense of clarity she had never felt before. The answers they had been searching for were not in the latest and greatest technology. They were in the way people thought, the way they adapted to their environment and used what they had to survive. The human ship had shown them something they would never forget. It had shown them that sometimes the greatest innovation wasn't about creating something new, it was about remembering the old ways. It was about using your mind, your hands, and your creativity to solve problems. And that was something no machine, no matter how advanced, could ever replace. The shuttle ride back to the space station was silent, but not uncomfortable. Ju-hyun and Seung-Ho sat side by side, their minds heavy with everything they had learned. The stars outside the window looked peaceful, almost like nothing had changed. But inside, everything had shifted. For years, they had been working to create perfect systems. Perfect machine systems that could predict every outcome, solve every problem. But the humans had shown them something completely different. They had shown them the power of simplicity, of using what you had and finding solutions with your own hands. And now, as they returned to their station, Ju-hyun and Seung-Ho couldn't stop thinking about it. Shu-ho broke the silence first. I can't stop thinking about what Myung said. She's right. We've been so focused on creating things that are perfect, things that can do everything for us. But maybe we've forgotten how to actually do things ourselves. Ju-hyun nodded, her eyes fixed on the stars outside. I've been thinking the same thing. We've built systems that take care of everything, but we've lost our ability to adapt. The humans, they've survived by being flexible, by thinking on their feet. They don't need AI to solve their problems. They solve them with their own creativity. Seung-Ho sighed, rubbing his temples. It's like we've made things so complicated that we've forgotten the basics. And now it feels like we're starting over. But I don't know if that's a bad thing. Ju-hyun turned to him, her expression thoughtful. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think it's exactly what we need. We've become too dependent on our technology, on machines that think for us. But real innovation comes from people. It comes from us. Seung-Jo looked at her, his face lighting up. So, what do we do now? Do we just throw away everything we've built and start fresh? Ju-hyun paused, considering his question. I don't think we need to throw everything away. We've learned a lot from our technology. But we need to stop seeing it as the answer to everything. Maybe it's time to go back to basics, to get back to the spirit of problem solving. We can use our technology, but we need to remember that we are the ones who create the solutions. Seung-Ho nodded slowly, clearly understanding. You're right. We've become so focused on perfecting machines that we've forgotten how to think like humans. Maybe the real breakthrough isn't in building better machines, but in reconnecting with our ability to think and create. Ju-hyun smiled faintly, her eyes filled with a new determination. Exactly. We need to stop seeing ourselves as just engineers building machines. We need to see ourselves as creators, as innovators. And that means embracing creativity, simplicity, and resourcefulness. As the shuttle drew closer to the space station, the two engineers sat quietly, each lost in their thoughts. They knew that they couldn't go back to the way things had been. Their minds had been opened to something new, something that went beyond technology, beyond the systems they had spent so many years perfecting. It wasn't just about building the best machines anymore. It was about finding solutions, even when the resources were limited. It was about using what you had to make the best of every situation. The shuttle docked with the space station, and Juhian and Sunjo stood up, ready to leave. As they stepped out of the shuttle and onto the station, they could already feel the weight of their decision settling in. They were about to make a change, a big one. They weren't sure what the future held, but they knew one thing for certain. They couldn't keep going down the same path. "We can't stay here, can we?" Sung-ho asked quietly. Juhian shook her head, her voice firm. "No, we can't. Not after what we've seen. Not after what we've learned. We need to leave Zedran Industries. We need to find a new way forward." Sung-ho looked at her, a mix of surprise and excitement in his eyes. "You're serious?" Juhian met his gaze with a calm confidence. "I'm serious. We've spent so much time building complex systems, thinking that technology could solve all our problems. But now we know the truth. The real power doesn't lie in the machines. It lies in us, the creators, the thinkers. And we need to find a place where we can really make a difference. A place where we can innovate, not just with technology, but with our own minds and hands." Sung-ho stood still for a moment, taking in what she had said. It was a big decision, one that could change everything. But in his heart, he knew she was right. They couldn't keep working in a place that no longer valued the kind of innovation they now believed in. "I think you're right," Sung-ho said slowly, his voice filled with resolve. "We need to go out there, find new opportunities, and create something that truly matters." Juhian smiled, her expression filled with purpose. "Exactly. Let's find a place where we can build things with heart, with creativity. Let's make something that works, something that people can truly use. Not just because it's advanced, but because it's practical, adaptable, and real." The decision was made. They would leave Zedran Industries and strike out on their own. It wouldn't be easy, and they didn't know exactly where their journey would take them. But they were no longer afraid of the unknown. They were ready to face it head-on, their minds open and their creativity guiding them as they walked through the station's corridors. Headed for their next steps, they knew that they had just taken the first step towards something bigger. They had learned from the humans, from their simplicity and resourcefulness. And now, they were ready to take that knowledge and create something new, something that would change the galaxy in ways they had never imagined. Juhian and Sung-ho left the space station behind, their minds focused on the future. It felt strange to walk away from everything they had known, but it also felt right. They had spent years building machines and systems for Zedran Industries, creating some of the most advanced technology in the galaxy. But now, they were ready to do something different, something that truly mattered. They didn't know exactly where they were headed or what they would find, but they knew they had to follow this new path. The humans had shown them something important, something they hadn't fully understood before. The key to true innovation wasn't in creating the most advanced technology. It was in creativity, adaptability, and simplicity. And they were determined to bring that mindset to life. After leaving Zedran Industries, Juhian and Sung-ho traveled to Earth, where they met with a group of engineers who shared their vision. The human engineers they had met on the ship were just the beginning. There were others out there, people who understood that technology wasn't just about perfection. It was about making something that worked, something that could solve real problems. They formed a new team, one that would focus on building technology that was simple, practical, and effective. It wasn't about making things complicated or flashy. It was about creating solutions that anyone, anywhere, could use. It was about making technology that could adapt to the needs of real people, not just those with the best resources or the most advanced systems. The new team worked together on a variety of projects. They built smaller, more efficient spacecraft that could be used by people from all walks of life. They developed tools that didn't rely on AI or advanced systems, but on the resourcefulness and creativity of the people using them. They didn't focus on making things perfect. Instead, they focused on making them work. One of their first projects was a simple communication device, something that could be used by anyone, anywhere. It wasn't the most advanced technology, but it was reliable, easy to use, and affordable. People everywhere started using it, and it quickly became a success. It wasn't about the technology itself. It was about how it helped people connect with one another, how it made their lives a little easier, Juhian and Sung Ho were proud of what they had created, but they knew this was just the beginning. They had learned so much from their time with the humans. They had learned that the most powerful tool was not the most advanced machine, the human mind, the ability to think and adapt. Technology was only a tool to make life better, not the end goal itself. As they continued to work, their reputation grew. They were known for their innovative ideas and their ability to solve problems in unexpected ways. They didn't focus on building the biggest or most complicated machines. Instead, they focused on solving real problems, on making life easier and more sustainable for everyone. And that, they realized, was true innovation.